Hello and welcome to Gardener's World. Just having final tidy through the woodland. But over the last couple of seasons, this area is coming into its own. You know, there's a coolness, a calmness about it, and most of that's provided by the colour green. But that said, there is some colour. In the front there, you've got the Luzula Nivea just popping up and doing its thing, and further along, there's a Strantia. So the colour will work its way through the season, and you can see around me that even the Digitalis, the foxglove, they just pepper their way through the site. But as I said, this area does rely on that colour green. Coming up in today's programme, Joe Swift travels to Devon to a truly inspirational space at Marwood Hill Gardens.
I'm here in Astilby Avenue. Some of them, sure, they're a bit of a throwback to the 80s, something your grandma might want to paint the hallway with, and it's a little bit of a shocking pink, that one. But there's many that are much more naturalistic as well.
We visit a specialist nurseryman in Scotland to learn more about the beautiful blue Himalayan poppy, Meconopsis.
I think the thing with Meconopsis is everybody says, I've tried to grow them, I can't grow them, they're impossible to grow. But I think there's no line truer than right plant, right place. If you can just follow a few key points, they really will thrive.
And I will be adding some sun-loving plants, tall ones, to the back of the border to add some interest. So this is an extension to the gravel garden that I've been finalising over the last few weeks. Got the structural planting in initially, and that helps bring all the planting around down into the space. And now I'm at the point where I suppose I want to add what I call the stars. So I've got two ways of thinking about that. One is just monthly, thinking every single month I come up and wander through this space, I want there to be something that's singing, you know? And then on top of that, I need to create some sort of rhythm and connection with that little area that I created before. When I look at the star of the month, it's this iris. So it's a beardy iris, and it's called Langport Storm. And I think you can more or less see in that first colouring, before it opens, it actually looks quite moody. But then as the fall appears, you've got this sort of smoky, reddy brown colour. This plant really does love those baking conditions. So the rhizome there, I'm more or less going to expose it. And that's why I'm not worried if there's any gravel gone into here either, because they love free draining. In fact, I'm going to push a little bit in. As I place it in, I'm just going to keep it slightly proud. So you imagine when I put the gravel back, I don't really want to bury that rhizome. What I want to do is have that happily baking in the sun. And then we just push the gravel back around. You can hear kids shouting and playing. It's not mine, it's the local school. So plenty of drainage in around these, but I will give them a good water later. I suppose the last little bit with that is that I've pinched them together a little bit, you know, so as you move through the area, you have to slow because they're a little bit closer together, and that is meant to make you stop and enjoy those flowers. So now we're going to add Eryngium. This is called Eryngium Pen Blue. It's only going to get to about 2 foot, and then the flower, as that comes alive, it more or less turns to an electric blue. You know, I suppose it's more or less fluorescent. I am going to soak those as I'm digging the hole. Though they do love those dry conditions that the irises do, it's a hot old day. You can more or less feel it going, oh, that's nice. So there you go. So imagine now the Stipa gigantica is going to come up, and little Eryngiums will pop up. Irises are talking to you in the middle of sort of May, June. Am I setting the scene? So you're with me, aren't you? I've got a few more to put in, but hopefully that sets the scene. Imagine next year I'm wandering up through here and the irises are popping up. You're going to enjoy that moment. Now, we're off to South Buckinghamshire to meet a lady who unfortunately lost her husband, but then found out that he'd amassed an incredible collection of iris. At that point, she was really not sure what to do, but she had a friend on hand to help.
My late husband, well, he loved his irises. He'd be out here with them until 11 o'clock at night. I became a great expert at keeping a meal warm. My name is Liz Prouting, and I was married to Peter for 52 years. Peter was a property developer. He didn't ever relax other than gardening. I think he could lose himself with the irises. I don't think he told people about them, really. I don't think he really thought they'd be interested.
I'm John Homan. I'm a friend of the Prouting family, and I'm also President Emeritus of the Stoke Poges, Wexham and Fulmer Horticultural Society. Peter was an avid gardener, and there were some delightful scenes all around the garden. But his main passion was irises. 6 months after Peter had died, Liz contacted me. She realised that this part of the garden had fallen into quite a bit of disrepair. Well, to be frank, the first impression I got was almost one of shock, because I knew what it was like in previous years, the big display in May, June. The rhizomes, the roots, were pretty much a tangled mess, covered in weeds. Obviously, Peter was not as fit and able as he was at that age to do the detail that he did in terms of maintaining the stock and the ground. I felt at the time that we had a moment of choice. We either had to tackle it now and get on with it, or it's going to be lost forever. So what we have here is half an acre of walled garden, 50 beds, each with 60 or 70 plants in each bed, but we have 70 different varieties of irises, all named, all meticulously recorded by Peter. And there's one in particular here I want to show you, Dennis Humphrey. This one, lovely lemony colour, was bred by Cy Bartlett in Somerset in 1992. I really like it because of its very delicate, lemony, buttery fragrance. I think this is probably one of the biggest private collections in the country. Back in 2018, when I first saw what was before us, I could see the challenge and the magnitude of the task ahead. There were two things that needed to be done. Immediately, the beds needed to be weeded to give the rhizomes a chance to thrive. But I knew that in the future, we were going to have to lift the whole lot, lift them and replant the whole lot. So if we didn't lift and divide, at that point, the irises then continued to grow, but they would clump, they would gradually choke themselves, and this collection would end up basically destroyed. I knew I couldn't do this alone. I needed manpower and I needed advice. So I contacted the British Iris Society initially to alert them to this collection. The British Iris Society advised us that we should allow these beds to flower again following May, June. The main reason for that was that we'd got Peter's meticulous archives and records, but we wanted to be absolutely sure that what we'd got on paper were verified. Well, 20th of July 2019 is etched in my memory. So it was a hot day, a bit like today, and 8 members of the British Iris Society had volunteered to come and help. There were 3 from my local horticultural society, plus myself, so 12 of us worked in lifting and started to replant the irises. It was a momentous day. And it took another 3 months to lift and divide and replant the rest of the beds. But 20th of July 2019 was key in the memory, and just look at it now. Wonderful. Well, one of the exciting things we have found here is that from Peter's old records, his survey he did in 2011, 2012, is this variety here, which we're pretty sure is one of his hybrids. It says here, OHF hybrid, OHF referring to the property. He clearly was hybridizing. I mean, not just collecting. Really, really exciting, and I'm thrilled to be able to say this is likely to be one of his hybrids. This particular bed here, we originally thought this was another of Peter's hybrids, but we're now pretty certain this is a French-bred iris called André Med, bred by Villemorin in 1922. And I gather it may even be lost in France. If it is lost in France, then yes, this is a bit special, and we may be able to supply them with some rhizomes. I'm sure Peter would have been pretty proud of that. Well, the net result of lifting and dividing the irises, when you're replanting one or possibly a double rhizome, we're left with 3, 4, 5, 6, even more rhizomes from the same plant. So we are splitting those and separating them out into single rhizomes. And what do we do with those? Thousands of them. So we firstly offered them to the local residents free of charge. We gave some to the local school. And then I struck on the idea, well, wouldn't it be good to contact some garden centres and nurseries to see if they would take a supply, boxes of them named, and offer them to the general public in return for charitable donations. 1 or 2 of the garden centres were calling me saying, have you got any more? Huge demand. But through all that, we managed to raise a few £1,000s for charity.
Peter would have been thrilled with that, especially, you know, the British Heart Foundation.
You got this from Chelsea, 1998.
Yes. I was looking at something else, and Peter came rushing over because he found this. There's one there we haven't got.
Wonderful. It's lovely to think that Peter's hard work over 40, 50 years and interest in irises has spawned interest in countless homes in this part of the world and has left a lasting legacy. Now, here's a question for you. Do you think Peter would have liked this film crew here today to come and film these irises and see what we've achieved?
Yes, I do.
Do you?
Yes. I think he'd have probably muttered about it to start with, but I'm quite sure when it came to it, he'd have been very proud.
That was a joy and heartwarming to think that Peter, over a long period of time, created that collection of irises, and now that heritage, in a sense, is living on and being shared. And on that note, I just wanted to share this because it's one thing that's been a joy to me. Have a look. What do you think it is? I'll be honest with you, I didn't have a clue the first time I saw this. It's actually a Chinese willow, so it's Salix magnifica, and put it in a sheltered position, and it's got through a pretty harsh winter. So for me, that's a bit special. It's now time for the first of your home films, and we're off to Suffolk to meet a lady that I think could teach us all a thing or two about gardening.
Hello, I'm Audrey. This is my garden. I'm 92 and I'm very proud of my garden. I do it myself and I have somebody that helps me cut the grass. He's a man of 72 but not quite as old as me. I've always loved gardening, but since lockdown it's been my absolute salvation because I live alone. And I find if I get a day where I feel really sort of fed up and down, if I go out in the garden, I forget all my troubles and bothers and I just get completely absorbed in what I'm doing. And I can spend several hours of the day out in the garden. My favourite plants are my aubrietia, which I'm trying to get to grow down the wall. I love granny bonnets. What are they called? Acrolegias. I don't think there's a flower in the garden that I don't really like. At the moment I'm very busy. I've just planted my melon seeds. I've got to string them right across the greenhouse. I normally pollinate them with the cucumber flower because I think, well, they're the same family, so why not? I hope you've enjoyed looking around my garden, and it just goes to show I'm never too old to garden.
Over the last couple of years, I've really been developing these herbaceous borders, but over the winter, I don't know about you, but I lost more than I did the winter before. So those gaps that have been created, you know, from losing stuff over the winter are becoming really prominent now. But to set the scene, you know, this pear tree really overhung the space, and it's an old tree, but we've given it a good prune back, and it's let a lot more light into this area. So if you imagine now, I've got a big space in the sort of foreground, and then at the back, things are going to come up. Well, this is what I'm imagining. Things are going to come up and just catch the bottom of the pear tree. But the next thing I'm thinking about is actually the rhythm down the border. And that doesn't matter whether you've got a big garden or a small garden, you know, just this idea of bouncing plants through a space. First thing I want to do is use this Echinopsis. And this is Vetch's Blue. If you imagine just looking at the foliage to start with, I know that that's going to sit comfortably with the two cardoons. And then when we come back in a little bit more, I've got the Veronicastrum. It's got a lovely sort of spike flower on it. Height-wise, going to get just shy of a metre. It's called Pink Glow, so as you imagine, pinky flower. And again, if you look at the other tones in the border, you know straight away it's going to sit comfortably. It was a plant that I lost in other places of the garden. Further down the border, it just didn't survive the winter, but I love it, you know, so I'm going to try it in drier conditions. I'll just ease that back in, no big lumps. Just work that round. Actually, interesting, look, the moment that I start digging back here, it's that much drier. You know, so you need to keep mind of that when that plant will probably sit itself in really quickly, and these might be a little bit slower. So I might mulch around this, but I'll just keep an eye on the watering over, you know, the coming weeks. And then back end of the year, this might get a little bit more organic matter just to help develop the sort of moisture retention in that area. So if you imagine now, the Veronicastrum is going to get up to what, 1.2 metres, depending on how much light it gets and moisture. But I'm trying to bring that Phyllicterum, bring it slightly down. Calamagrostis will get up as the season goes on. So there's a sort of constant movement up and down through the border. But you don't really just want to stop there. Don't be afraid to bring some of that height to the front of the border. But now if you look in front of me, there's a Verbascum, and they can dot their way up all the way front and back because there's height, but also they're light and they're feathery. But then the Valerian, there in front, because you can see through it, put it at the front of the border, you walk down the pathway and the bees are on it. All of a sudden, you know, you're having a moment. So the Echinopsis. And gonna get up to probably just shy of a metre. And what's lovely about it is this sort of thistly, globe-like flower that's a really strong blue. So again, you know it's gonna sit quite prominent and engage you, you know, as you're walking through the garden. Going to give those a really good watering in, and remember to keep an eye on the ones at the back there in that slightly drier conditions over the coming weeks, but I'm sure they'll flourish. Now, Joe has gone to Devon to visit a garden that I am incredibly fond of. It's called Marwood Hill.
The gardens were developed by the late Dr. James Smart, and he was awarded a Victoria Medal of Honour by the Royal Horticultural Society in recognition for being a superb plantsman, a great and generous gardener, and for giving pleasure to thousands of other gardeners. Now, the garden is now run by his family and includes a fantastic collection of plants, including a national collection of astilbes and Japanese iris. A couple of stalwarts of the bog garden. Who better to tell me more about growing Astilbes and Japanese iris than former head gardener Malcolm Farrow? There's not much he doesn't know about the garden, having been working here since the 1970s. You're a volunteer here
I'm
now,
just a volunteer now
You're-
for 5 days a week. It's my life is this garden.
Yeah.
Came down to Marwood about 1972, and there was about 8 Astilbes then.
Only 8.
Only 8 then. Well, we're up to about 180 now.
You got the perfect conditions for Astilbes here?
Well, it is, and I mean, one of the things with Astilbes, people know them, that they have to be moist soil. In actual fact, the main thing with them is to lift them after a number of years, say 5, 6, 7 years, and split them up. Of course, it gives you more plants, which is wonderful, but it puts more vigour into them.
Do you have a favourite?
Very difficult, of course, with all these ones, but probably the nicest I like is the one called Spotlight. It's a fairly new one, but it's got reddish stems, but they've probably got the best flower you can get. Spotlight's very nice. It's a good one.
How long is the season of interest in this border?
They'll start about mid-June. The first one will come out. But then the main thing is July. That's the peak time. But they will go on. If you've got these big tall ones, they'll go on into mid-August.
You also got a huge collection of Iris ensata, the Japanese iris, which enjoy the same boggy conditions, don't they?
That's right. They do need moisture and they do need acid soil. They don't want to be planted in water, but just keep them a bit moist. Beautiful things. They come from, obviously, Japan, and they were grown around the temples for hundreds and hundreds of years. Very much flamboyant colours, all the flowers of them. But they do work in very well with the Astilbes and the primulas, of course. Wonderful round ponds or by the edge of a stream or something like that.
Well, listen, don't let them work you too hard here.
No,
you know what I mean?
I won't.
And I'm going to go and explore the wonderful gardens.
That's
It is
wonderful.
a garden to explore.
Wonderful.
Lovely to meet you.
Thank you.
Cheers. This middle area is occupied by hundreds and hundreds of Astilbes, all in different heights and beautiful plumes and incredible colours. I wonder if Ken Dodd was a fan. I'm here in Astilbe Avenue. Some of them, sure, they're a bit of a throwback to the 80s, something your grandma might want to paint the hallway with, and it's a little bit of a shocking pink, that one. But there's many that are much more naturalistic as well, you know, something like this, which is in bud, it's coming into flower, and there's also some with lovely dark stems as well, and really lovely deep-cut foliage. But as we move away from the pond, the soil gets drier. Here we've got a sort of mid-story, mid-height Astilbes, looking great. But over here, the soil is so much drier, it's under the dapple shade, yes, shade of this tree. And these dwarf varieties, so we're getting shorter as it gets drier, are positively thriving. So they're a great plant for linking sunny areas where there's lots of moisture into drier, shady areas, sort of connecting those two spaces together. This is an absolutely gorgeous spot by this stream, which is keeping this planting nice and moist. And there's some beautiful Japanese iris here, just perfectly in flower. But we've also got Primula prolifera. Now, this is the yellow one. It's taller and it's floating perfectly over this border around eye level. Now, this will come true from seed, so they'll all be the same. This is one of my favourite parts of the garden. This is like a river of perennial planting through here, and actually you get to hear little trickles of the stream that runs down the middle there with this ebullient planting either side. And what I like about it is that there's a path that just leads you through. You're looking across the planting at eye level, and it just leads you all the way down. It feels as if it goes on forever. It's just such a fantastic thing to experience. It's beautiful. Well, on a hot summer's day, there is no better place to be than in a garden. And in this garden in particular, we've got the lakes, the streams and the bog planting, which bring a cooling presence to the space. And it's got to be thanks to Dr. Smart, who had the vision in the first place. And the RHS said, when they gave him his Victoria Medal of Honour, that he had brought a lot of pleasure to thousands of gardeners. And I include myself now in those thousands.
What a garden that is. When I was 16 years old, it was the first major garden that I ever visited, and we did it as a college group, and we had a talk from Dr. Smart, and it left an impression on me, and I just, you know, it's somewhere that stayed with me ever since. This rose, I walked past it earlier on, I felt slightly guilty. You might have remembered we were in here tying things in a couple of months ago. But I realised what I've done is I've planted this rose, forgotten about it, and it's getting a little bit overcrowded. So what I want to do is just get in here, cut some of the grass away. If you haven't got time to, you know, weed a whole area, but you can just tidy around new planting and giving it a bit of room, just so that you're helping it really with food, with light, with water. Still to come in today's show, we meet a nurseryman who has unlocked the secrets of growing Meconopsis.
A lot of people think that you need ericaceous soil to grow Meconopsis. I believe that's not true, and a lot of people will debate that.
And now we've got a chance to see another one of your home films, and it's from Cheshire, and it's Annette Hurst and her daughter Miriam, and they've tackled a really tricky space.
Hello. Hello. I'm Miriam, and this is my mum, the head gardener at our house.
We wanted to show you how we created our terrace garden from a patch of land which was full of brambles and nettles.
So this is the bottom of our garden, which was only planted about 2 years ago. The garden is on the edge of a woodland, and this is the last terrace that we've built on the bottom of it. Mum, how did you do it?
So we dug out some foundations for these wooden posts, and we're able to put some earth at the bottom here and plant these lovely acers. And then above it, we've levelled a little bit and put some grass and a little place to have a cuppa.
It's our favourite place for a cup of tea. So this is the view from our favourite tea spot. And the sun's just come out for us again. Here's a little bumblebee having his lunch.
This was the first terrace we dug out, so we put these posts in so we could level the ground, and it was all rotated down to here. I bought a couple of trees. The rest of it is just transplants from the garden.
And we've got some fruit bushes here. What have we got?
We've got various red currants and white currants and gooseberries, and it's been taken over by this woodruff this year.
And this is the overall structure of the garden. Hope you've enjoyed seeing our garden.
The hard work of terracing really paid off, as we can enjoy gardening it now.
Bye!
Bye!
The hard graft that you have put into that garden, incredible. But for me, it was the smiles that it was putting on your faces. Just that joy that that space is giving you, so keep it up. We are back in the ornamental veg garden. I've got an idea, all right? Bear with me. I come down in the morning, I put the kettle on, and I'm stood there waiting for it to doing a few jobs. I look out the window and I think, I want to bring that garden into the kitchen. And that's what I want to do. Add more cut flower, especially through this space, just so that I can have even a tiny little posy, just to remind me what's going on. When it comes to cut flower, it's really whatever you can grow that will sit happily in a vase. But at the same time, don't forget foliage. So here, I'm going to start with this bronze fennel. You smell the scent's incredible, but if I cut this, get it in a vase quickly, it sort of provides this wonderful frothy foliage that I can then work the flowering plants into. You might find it seeds around a little bit, but for me, that's probably to be encouraged. So, what I'm adding here is a Cirsium, but when you look at this thistle head, as that matures, it's just going to be wonderful sort of ruby colour. So, again, I'm not just thinking about flower, I'm thinking about leaf shape. And this thing will really clump up over a period of time, but remember, you can dig and divide it. So, coming across here now, this is an Achillea. But you can see straight away, look, different flower shape. Some lovely sort of flat heads, but this is called terracotta, and really that describes the flower. Beautiful sort of orangey, terracotta-y colour. It's going to work well. Just tidy that in around. So there you go. What I've got to do now is give that some water and it'll settle in, and we'll be cutting flower from that very soon. Now, we've got another chance to see a film where Francis went to meet a lady that takes this to a whole new level.
Allotments are usually thought of as places to grow produce and the cultivation of delicious fruit and veg. But what if you could dedicate your whole allotment not to things to eat, but things that look beautiful and can be used in different ways? I've come to meet Helena Wilcox on her allotment in North London. Hi, Helena.
Hello.
This looks amazing.
Oh, thank you.
And it's all cut flowers?
Yep, all cut flowers.
That's incredible. And what made you want to do that on an allotment?
Well, I had an allotment originally where I grew all veg, and then when I started my floristry business, it just seemed to make sense to grow flowers instead.
And why is it so important for you to kind of grow your own rather than buying them in?
I just saw the huge amount of flowers that are being flown in from abroad, so I just thought it was an obvious thing to do. At least I can have some grown flowers that are grown here, and then I get the others locally.
Well, can you show me some of the things you're growing?
Yeah, sure. This is the dahlia bed, and then we've got poppies, which I've obviously let go to seed because the seed heads are so nice.
So you're using the seed heads rather than the flowers for
Yes,
your displays?
Because the flowers, even though they're beautiful, they're a bit temperamental. They don't last very long.
No.
Got cornflowers, some lovely ammi. It just flowers all summer. You can sow it direct, and it just is so beautiful and makes all arrangements look really feathery and summery. And then this is the cosmos bed, which again is just a really easy flower to grow. Flowers all summer, and it gives you loads of joy, and it adds loads of texture to arrangements, which I really like.
Yes.
It sort of dances above everything, which is nice. It's just pretty.
Beautiful. Helena started on this plot back in January, and since then, it's bloomed into a world of colour. So what are your absolute kind of favourite must-have cut flower species?
So this is actually my favourite. It's chocolate cosmos, and it smells like chocolate, which is always great. It also has this incredible, really deep colour when it first comes out, and then it goes more into this sort of paler red, which is obviously incredibly beautiful.
But how do you care for these? Because I've always found them a little bit overwhelming. They're not hardy, are they? So you can only grow them for 1 year. And do you grow them from seed, or...?
So I buy them as the bare root,
and
Right.
they often sell them in supermarkets, and they're really cheap, so you don't have to, you know, spend a fortune on them. There's only 4 plants in here, and they really get big in one season, and you get so much harvest out of them, so it is worth it. And then in terms of looking after them, you do need to deadhead them quite a lot, like all the Cosmos family.
Yeah.
And it's just about the soil, really, and that's why I did raised beds, so it was topsoil and compost and lots of manure, and they seem to be really happy.
Ooh. Thank you.
There you go.
Nice shed. Helena grows her flowers in blocks and rows, which makes weeding a whole lot easier. But it also helps when it comes to harvesting.
So roses is something that I always try and get ones that have an amazing scent, because so many flowers don't smell anymore.
Yeah, because a rose without scent is always a little bit of a shame, isn't it, really?
Yeah, definitely.
So what's this one?
So this is Jude the Obscure.
Oh, that smells amazing.
Yeah, it does, doesn't
And does it keep its smell in a bouquet as well?
Yep, yeah, it would keep all the way through until it died, yeah. And I thought because you're here today, we could do some arranging.
You'll have a lot of work to do teaching me to do that, I think.
So you want the stem to be quite long. And then you want to put it straight into the water. People think it's nice to harvest them into a basket or something, but it's completely impractical. You want to get them into water immediately, because as soon as you cut a stem, just like if you cut your arm, it starts to close up. So you want to get it straight into water so it has a proper drink.
Is that the reason why you cut off the stems when you buy cut flowers from a shop?
Yeah, and sometimes when I give flowers to friends and they might not be in water or something, you know, and they take them home and they just put them on the side, I'm like, ooh, it's so hard not to just be like, cut those and put it into water, because it really does keep the life of the flowers going for much longer. So now we're going to start the arrangements.
I'm genuinely nervous about this.
Just try to relax and enjoy it. There's no pressure.
OK.
Usually with these arrangements, I suggest doing the foliage first, because it's much easier to get a shape and a structure with your foliage before you start going with like huge flowers and stuff, and then it's hard.
So how tall would you make this?
Don't be scared to cut things quite short and put them in quite low, in quite far. Yeah.
OK.
And then you can start going in with some bolder flowers, like your dahlias or something, if you'd like.
Let's go for an echinacea.
Yeah, so pretty.
There, your favourite chocolate cosmos, I think. Going to come into play.
I think I'm done.
I think I am just about done too. Although I could fiddle and fiddle.
Yeah. It looks so lovely, honestly, I'm not just saying that.
Oh, so does yours, look at that. But actually the thing that I'm really interested in is how much it informs your gardening. If you ever have a bed or something that you want to do and you're not sure the colour schemes, playing with floral arrangements would give you everything that you needed to inform your kind of plant choices. And very handily, it's my sister's birthday. So she is going to get this and hopefully thank me.
Oh, lucky her.
Thank you very much. It's been amazing.
Thank you, it's my pleasure.
Helena has now moved to Yorkshire and taken on a bigger plot, so I would imagine she is having a whole load of fun. Helena, I wish you luck. Veg garden. I actually describe it as my hobby, but in the last 2 weeks I really think things have come on leaps and bounds, and this sun is glorious, but it does force your veg on. So I'm constantly sowing, harvesting, and we're having some great meals. That said, you do not need this space to be able to grow beautiful things for you and your family to enjoy. I've got a little idea for you. So here we go. Excuse me a moment. I think on a hot day, sometimes a cup of tea, it's just what's required. So what we're going to do here is just sow some herby salad leaves, really. So I've got a crock in the bottom of my pot there because the hole is rather large. If it's a load of small holes, I don't tend to bother. Just filling up. The mix that I'm using is peat-free compost, a tiny little bit of horticultural grit, and then I've actually added some topsoil. And now what I'm going to do is just pre-water. So now we've got a lovely base just to sow onto. When you know, any mixes like this, just make sure, you know, have a look, the details. It's something that you love, that you know you want to add to your sandwiches. And so when I sow, I probably will, knowing me, end up sowing a little bit on the heavy side. But I can thin it. So as things start to sort of come up and they germinate, I'll thin things out and won't waste them, because we'll just use them to dress, you know, meals and bits and pieces. And what I'll do is I'll make sure that it's tucked away out of that sort of main heat of the day, and it means it won't bolt, it won't flour, and I'll get longer out of this as a mix. What I've got to do now is top it off. So I'm just going to use topsoil. I'm going to cover this with about a centimetre of soil all the way across. And there you go, that's just nicely levelled off. It's that easy. This will go by the back door, so it doesn't get forgotten about, but also it means that my kids do not have an excuse not to eat salad. Now, it's time for your last film, and we're off to London to meet Ellie Compo-Bassi, who lives in a flat, but that's not stopped her gardening.
Hi Gardeners World, my name is Ellie and I live in a flat in West London. During the first lockdown I managed to acquire 3 houseplants and they have since multiplied to closer to 30. It's my new hobby and I've really enjoyed getting to learn about the different plants and how to look after them, and while I was furloughed it really helped keep my brain engaged. It also inspired me to do something with my outdoor space. I have a very small north-facing balcony, so it meant that I had to be quite selective with which plants I could use, but I'd love to show you what I have been able to achieve. As you can see, the space is quite tight. Here are my summer colour geraniums, which have just started to bloom, but my real pride and joy is this Acer, which is called an Orange Dream, and I'm looking forward to the leaves changing colour and becoming a beautiful orange. Then I have a few troughs, and with a small balcony I'm trying to utilise as much space as I can by using troughs on my downpipe. Then over on this part here I have my azalea, which has just come into full bloom also and is beautiful, and I can see that from my sofa, so that's lovely to look out on. I have tried to create the illusion of having more green space and the outdoors coming in by moving some of my houseplants to this balcony area. So that was a quick tour of my balcony and some of my houseplants. It shows with some stubborn determination you can make something colourful and beautiful out of a very small outdoor space, and it's brought me some real joy.
Ellie, you keep growing. Things that amaze me about houseplants over the last couple of years, they seem to be the gateway into gardening for so many people, and it's lovely to see. And I go back to being a kid, and I think these house leeks, you know, these were one of the first things we ever grew, and I had them on the windowsill in my bedroom. A couple of weeks ago, I made a living coffee table. So we used the house leeks and a couple of little bits of stone, and it turned out really well. So I came up with the idea of maybe creating a mobile one. With this old bucket, I've drilled a load of holes in it, because the key to these plants, you know, they really are easy to look after, but it's drainage, 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 and more drainage. So, first thing I want to do is fill this up with some gravel. Fill the rest up with a gravel and compost mix. So I've used peat-free compost, about 60%, and then 40% of this is horticultural grit. Once that's done, I'm about an inch from the top there. So the first thing I want to do is place the coaster. So this is just an offcut of a piece of stone, but all I've done is just texture the top of it, just so as in reality things start to age, this just becomes a little bit more interesting. But honestly, you could do it with an old tile, just a single one, as long as it fits that mug or the glass. So that's done, and then that goes in place. All right, I've just lifted that slightly. So once that's in place, I'm going to get a key plant. And this is the fun bit really, because you can just play. Why not create something like this? You could use, you know, herbs or something like that, or just use annual interest. But what I want to do now is just fill in the little voids with some gravel, all right? So there you go. Make sure there's enough room for the pint glass. And I wasn't joking, I am going to take this around the garden with me. And I promise you, more than anything, these are low maintenance plants. They don't need a lot of work. And now, we're off to meet a man that looks after an exquisite group of plants, but they do come with a little bit more of a reputation.
My name is Graham Gunn. I'm nursery manager at Kevitt Garden Plants. We really like to specialise in those more unusual plants, just those little talking points that you would see and just say, what's this or what's that? I think one of the real highlights for me is when we walk in and on summer's day, you hear the bird song and you see these beautiful blues. We are amongst the Meconopsis. They're beautiful blue flowers. They're really unique and there's not many blue things in nature. They grow high up in the Himalayas, really, really high up, sort of at cloud level, almost sort of 4,000 metres high. The name Meconopsis comes from the Greek mekon and opsis, which means like a poppy. And obviously being part of the poppy family, that pretty much sums up what they are. They really do come in such a diverse range of blues. You can't imagine how many blues there are of blue. They really are so diverse, and the height varies as well. So even between the different cultivars, you can get smaller ones, just a couple of feet high, to some of the real giants, which can be sort of well over a metre tall. I think the thing with Meconopsis is everybody says, I've tried to grow them, I can't grow them, they're impossible to grow. But I think there's no line truer than right plant, right place. If you can just follow a few key points, they really will thrive. So Meconopsis as a genera are sort of broken down broadly into 4 groups. The first of those is the big blues. Secondly are the blue pricklies, and you really need quite specialised soil and attention to grow those. Thirdly is the discoid group. These are very, very rare and so little is known about them, and only a small handful of people have ever seen them in the wild. And lastly are the evergreen group, which take sort of 3 or 4 years to grow, produce a huge basal rosette, and then from that they produce a flower and then die. So the main Meconopsis that everybody talks about, that everybody wants to grow, are the big blues. So the big blues really do live up to their name. Some of them have this huge, beautiful blue flower. It can be up to sort of 6 to 8 inches wide in certain cases. And they have these beautiful yellow and golden anthers with a prominent style in the middle. So this variety here is Meconopsis lingholm. It has a beautiful blue flower, and as the flower emerges, the bud casing on it just sort of breaks away and gently falls off. It's a great variety for the beginner, as it bulks up really well and is a little bit more suitable for those challenging conditions. It wasn't until I went to China for the first time that really did open my eyes to the amazing world of alpine plants. I think when you see the Meconopsis and you see those sort of conditions that they do grow just on the woodland edge or in almost pure gravel in certain circumstances and just growing in like a little rock crevice, you suddenly realise how you can kill a lot of these plants with kindness really, and they're a lot tougher than you think. Here we are, and these are two really different plants. We've got this one here, which is Meconopsis mophead, and as you can see, the flower is huge. They can sort of be up to 6 inches wide, and they produce these huge sort of dinner plate sized flowers, and they're ideal for the back of a sort of damp, shady corner of the garden. And this one is Meconopsis mildred. It's a beautiful ice blue flower, a little bit shorter than some of the varieties, and a little bit smaller flower, but that really doesn't take anything away from its beauty. It's ideal for sort of front of border or somewhere where it's a little bit more protected from winds, just to really appreciate its beauty. So even though Meconopsis are known as the big blue poppies, they do come in a very wide range of colours. There's white forms, purple forms, pinks, reds, and even some yellow ones. What we have here is Meconopsis punicea and Meconopsis quintuplinervia. I know they're quite a mouthful to say, but these also come from the Himalayas. Where the populations occur in nature and they get close together, they form a natural hybrid. And when that hybrid forms, you get the lovely redness of punicea and the perenniality of quintuplinervia. That result is Meconopsis cookii. This is a really good garden plant, and we'd thoroughly recommend it if you want a little bit different colour. A lot of people think that you need ericaceous soil to grow Meconopsis. I believe that's not true, and a lot of people will debate that. I tend to grow them in a general multi-purpose soil. They really aren't fussy the soil type they're in. The most important thing with Meconopsis above anything else is where they are situated in the garden. Because they grow at the cloud level, they have got moisture around them all the time. They need to be somewhere nice and damp that just stays a little bit moist throughout the day. Their number one enemy is the sun. Although these look like big, herbaceous border plants that you just want to throw in there with your standard herbaceous perennials, don't. They really need to be kept out of the sun and in the shade. They grow up in the Himalayas where the yaks walk and freely do their business. So if you can't get your hands on any yak manure, the other really important thing to do is make sure they are well fertilised. So in the winter time, they would be under sort of at least a foot or so of snow. And that is actually a very dry environment for them to be in. And this also needs to be replicated in the garden setting. And that's often done just by planting them a little bit proud and on a little mound, so that if it was to be very wet, that moisture drains away and they're not sat in that water. I think one of the main things to remember with Meconopsis, that although they grow at sort of 4,000 metres high, you really don't need to go to that level to enjoy them in your garden. Just make sure you follow those really key cultivation tips, and you too can enjoy Meconopsis at home.
Aren't they a plant that just stops you in your tracks? That intensity of colour, and who doesn't love a poppy? When we moved in to the garden, there were two plants that really were all over the place, and this was one of them. So like a really deep, rich, ruby coloured sort of opium poppy. And I let it have freedom, and it does what it wants, and I put it up here and there. And also there was a tiny little orange one that's now started to work its way through the gravel garden. But if we roll back to December, I would have been kneeled here talking to you in about a foot of water, and it stayed for about 8-10 weeks. So I lost an awful lot of the planting. So what I'm trying to do now is create a garden that will deal with the wetter months. So at the moment, I've let the poppies do their thing, and I'm going through, just thinning things out and finding. Here, I've got a campanula that I thought that I lost. So as well as clearing for the plants that I've got existing, I'm trying to create new spaces so I can put things like the Iris sibirica in, and hopefully that'll help us through the winter months. But it is going to take a little bit of time. And while I get on with this, it's something you could do at the weekend. At this time of year, apple trees naturally shed excess fruit. You can help this process by reducing each cluster of developing fruit down to 2 or 3 apples. This takes time, but is worth the effort and will ensure you get the very best from your harvest. If you have a repeat flowering rose, it's a good idea to deadhead them as the flowers go over. Don't just pull off the spent petals, but snip off the fading blooms below the head. This will encourage your rose to keep flowering. As soft fruit ripens, it's important to protect it from the birds. Take some netting and drape it over the plants, fixing it firmly in place all the way around. Make sure it's taut so birds can't accidentally get tangled in it. Leave it in place until your fruit is ripe and ready to harvest. Just a job. That's exactly what this area was created for. No, not so I can sit and drink beer in the garden, but it was to come and just be and enjoy. And part of the reason though I put it here was because of its setting. The trees behind me, they carry this sort of delicate movement at certain times of the day. The big old viburnum sits quite heavy over here, but it gives you a chance to create the planting off it. The sun goes down over there, so I know as this matures and gets better, everything's going to be backlit. And that all adds to sort of an atmosphere that you know are going to create those special moments. So I will be back next week at 9:30. In the meantime, look after yourselves. I'm going to enjoy my mackerel and my brown bread and butter. So, goodbye.